Everybody, I'd like to welcome you again for the fifth internet interview already on the first worldwide online Harp Congress. And it's, as I said, fifth one already. The time flies very fast. And today we have again a special guest. And honestly, today it's even more special because he is not in Europe, but he lives in California. So for him to wake up today in the morning, it was really a big help, really, for me to accept this invitation. And I'm very honored that our really guest, ALFREDO Rolando Ortiz, the very famous soloist of the Paraguayan harp, has accepted, and he can be with us today. And by the way, he's living in California, in the city which calls Corona, but we should be very careful that it's not connected with the virus in these times, but that he can be really, like, he is healthy and he's able to be with us. So welcome, ALFREDO Rolando Ortiz from California, the soloist on the Paraguayan harp, and I'm so glad that you are with us.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Should I say dobrý den?
Dobrý den in Czech.
Yes, it's about 8 in the morning in Corona, California, like the beer. Let's think positive. It's like the Corona beer, the famous Mexican beer. And everything is fine in our home and our family. Fortunately, we are all staying safe in these difficult times. But I'm delighted to be here chatting with you about that special Congress where we both had the incredible opportunity to be there.
Absolutely. I must say, really, that was the first time I heard you, and it was the first time you impressed everybody. And I know that everybody knows how your performances were fantastic and how you just amazed everyone. So just tell me, it was your first Congress at the, we are talking about the third World Harp Congress in Vienna in 1987. And it was your first Congress ever, or you have been before?
Not at all. I can tell you something very interesting. In 1979, well, let me take that even before that. 1978, my friend Suzanne McDonald calls me. She was living in California, just about an hour drive from my home. I used to live at the time I had just still living in Long Beach, California. Mm-hmm. And so she calls me and says, "Alfredo, can you come to my home right away? I have somebody that wants to meet you." So I arrived there, and Fia Berghaal from the Netherlands was at her home. I brought my harp as she had requested. And I played for them. We were chatting a little bit, and then Fia says, "I would like to invite you to come to the Harp Week in the Netherlands next year," 79. But in 79, when the Harp Week was happening, we already had a daughter. She was 8 months old. So we were like gypsies traveling with a harp, Paraguayan harp, and a big suitcase and flying. I remember we flew into Luxembourg first. Into Belgium. That was, Luxembourg was way before. I know the truth. Anyway, so we fly to Belgium, and this is a funny anecdote I want to tell you. Imagine we are on the street. I thought, how am I going to go from the train station to the hotel, which is just a block away? So I had like this set of wheels that were to move furniture that I put under the case of my harp. My harp case didn't have wheels yet. Mm-hmm. So we are with this gigantic suitcase, a stroller with a kid, and pushing this harp, getting to the hotel. And suddenly a little truck comes by, and they heard us talking in Spanish. The trucker was obviously, the driver was from Spain, opens the window and says, "Would you like some bread?" Because we look like gypsies or something. So this kind man gave us this nice, just baked, big baguette. French baguette. That was our breakfast right there. That was the beginning of an incredible adventure, because it extends too long beyond the Congress. But we made it to the Harp Week. It was a small group of teachers, and we had a large group of students. This has been something that has been happening for many years. And actually, during the Harp Week, there was already the talk about this possibility of the Congress. I was invited to go back again in 1980, mm-hmm. the same Harp Week. I was teaching, I was performing in concerts. And I was actually in the first meeting when they were literally going to create the Congress. I'm not in the official list of the people that founded it because it was later in some, they did a trip together and so on. But I did participate in all the meetings when the World Harp Congress was being created. Then one day I was at home sleeping, and you know, your time changed. I have this early morning call, very early, much earlier than 8 in the morning. It was like at, I don't know, 6 in the morning or something. I had this phone call, and my phone is next to my bed there. I answer, and it's Fia. And she's telling me things, and I'm kind of paralyzed there. And my wife saying, "What's happening? What's happening?" And Fia was telling me that she wanted to invite me to go and play in the opening concert of the first World Harp Congress in Maastricht. And that she was willing to have somebody arrange some of my compositions, because she wanted me to play with the Konica Military Kapelle, which I think is the way they pronounce it, which means it's the royal band, not orchestra, the royal band of the Netherlands, which actually had 2 harps, first and second pedal harps. Mm-hmm. Sadly, I understand that institution, after many, many years, it dissolved not too long ago. So my first World Harp Congress was the very first one. A very scary, intimidating experience. I played the opening concert of the first World Harp Congress in the middle of a heat wave. Very interesting anecdote for a harpist listening. My strings are nylon. My harp was getting out of tune. Everything was going low because of the heat and the moisture. But the poor pedal harpist, and I was trying to find her name. I couldn't locate the program to remember properly, from Japan. She was playing a Dutch composition by Badding, a composer from the Netherlands. And her pedal harp broke no less than 10 strings during the day.
Oh my.
So I remember she was just terrified. The strings were popping, her gut strings in these weather circumstances. And but we survived it. It was a very emotional, very wonderful experience. I also did a lecture with transparencies projected about the Latin American harp styles and so on, something that I've done for many, many years, also in other events like the American Harp Society. So that was my very first harp congress, was at the very first one, the opening concert.
We can have a better guest today than you, because this is absolutely unique. There is no one else to have this kind of opportunity, and you really have something so fantastic in your career and in your memory.
It was an incredible honor. Very scary too. Very intimidating to play with all of these famous harpists. I was actually invited, and I had all the plans set to go to the second one in Israel. Mm-hmm. Sadly, that was the time, as you remember, that a lot of airplanes were hijacked in Greece and so on. It became a very dangerous traveling time in that part of the world near Israel. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't ready to go until I didn't know what was happening, and I found my wife was actually locking herself in the bathroom crying in panic. And she didn't want to tell me nothing because she didn't want me to cancel the trip. But when I realized the level of stress she was going through and everything, and the uncertainties, I just had to tell them, communicate to them and say that I was very sorry, but I wasn't going to go. And it was a very difficult time especially for people from the United States, being in the middle of one circumstance like that. So I eventually went to Israel, not to a World Harp Congress, but I had played concerts in Israel since. And then here it was, Vienna, the third Congress, where I managed to go. Luz Marina couldn't come with me that time. We had 2 little daughters already at the time, that needed attention. So.
No, I remember that absolutely amazingly, really. And I have also, you will see, and the video, which will be broadcast after our interview, you will see that I have also the video from you when you were at the exhibition playing. So really? You were really impressing.
I look the same.
You look right? Absolutely the same. You look absolutely the same. That's really. So what's the big difference between the harp days, first, which were arranged before by Fia in Holland, and the first, and the first Congress in Maastricht and the Congress in Vienna. Was there any difference?
Well, the Harp Week was a much more intimate situation. There were not that many students. And the total number of the teachers, we were just probably about a dozen people involved, less than that. Well, I remember, well, Suzanne McDonald was also there. Vera Dulova from the Soviet Union was there. And Emilia Moskvitina from the Soviet Union was also there, one of the teachers. And of course, Fia, Franchette Bartholomé from Belgium was there teaching. I remember Sergio Natra, the famous composer from Israel, was also present. Oh my goodness. There were others. I'm sorry, I skipped the names right away. I should remember. Maybe they will come up later. But anyway, but there was a much more intimate situation. An interesting anecdote, I remember being in those meetings, and this is Netherlands, and the time of the year I don't recall exactly, but it was rain constantly. Not pouring, but it was sprinkling. And I remember a funny moment when the sun came out and everybody came inside telling everybody, sun is out, sun is out. Everything was totally informally interrupted. Everybody ran outside to have some sun for a few minutes. And probably 10 minutes later started sprinkling again. So everybody back inside, just and continued. So much more intimate. It was held in a place that has been turned into a convention center where we were even staying there. They had dorms. It was like a monastery. It was a monastery that had been turned into a convention center. They have modernized the rooms and everything. So we were staying in the same building. It was a very beautiful event because everybody was together. We had all the meals together, all the different activities, the concerts then were done more open to the general public in different locations nearby. It was not in Amsterdam. It was in Rolduc and Kerkrade, the southern part of the Netherlands.
I see. Okay.
Where the Congress, the Harp Week was, and of course the first Congress was in Maastricht in the southern part of the Netherlands also. So those are very different events. The Congress itself, of course, even the first one, there was a large number of harpists, much more activities. And ever since it kept growing, some places more than others, but it's become a very large organization with many members and large attendance from many countries. The one in Vienna was already considerably larger, and of course, Vienna attracted a lot of people. And such a beautiful city. Again, the time of the year, we had a tremendous heat wave. You want to hear some personal funny anecdotes from that experience?
Absolutely.
Okay, no internet. Nowadays, you can choose a hotel. You can see photos of your bedroom. You can see if you like the lobby. You can see everything. At the time, the options were a written letter that told you that you could reserve this particular group of hotels, which were too expensive for me at the time. There was like a second group of pricing, and then there was the cheapest one, and I thought, let me go for the intermediate. So the intermediate was still costly for us, and we're talking about so many years ago. I remember very well. It was way over $40 per night to stay. When I arrived, it was this building. I don't know what it had been before, but my room, I could stretch my arms sideways and touch the side walls. The bed was for one person, very narrow. If you were a little bit too heavy, you wouldn't have fitted in that bed. It had the luxury of a shower in the room, which I learned later, that was really fancy for the particular location. But then, of course, the toilet had to walk 50 meters down the hallway and wait in line. But the view was beautiful. I remember opening that window, which was wall to wall, not very big. Again, I could touch from my arms, I could touch the two walls. So when I opened that window, it was this beautiful, very centuries-old courtyard, and right across the courtyard was this beautiful church tower, the bell tower. It was really beautiful. Gorgeous until at 6 in the morning, the bell started calling for mass. And it sounded like the bell was inside my room, the sound level. It was just like this bang every day. And then it happened like every hour for the other mass and for the other. So one thing I was sure of was that I would wake up early every day for all the activities of the Congress in Vienna and walk then a few blocks to where the activities were taking place in a palace in the city.
That's wonderful that you have such a memory. It's fantastic that you can really talk about these kind of things, because not many people can 30 years ago remember what they have done and where they were living, and you have a really wonderful memory. That's absolutely amazing. And is there, when you were performing at the World Harp Congress in Vienna, because I have 2 concerts where you were performing. One was in the pop concert where many of the jazz players as well. And then it was not in the Auersberg Palais, but it was in the different venue. And then you were playing in the Auersberg Palais. It was arranged like that before, or had it been somehow spontaneous?
I don't recall if it was like a prearranged thing, or once I arrived there, I realized what the schedule was. That part I don't remember. It's so different nowadays with the possibilities of communicating and then getting all of this formal information. I remember arriving. One thing I remember was a nightmare with my recordings, because I have brought my LPs for sale.
Yes.
And they have not delivered them. They were kept in customs, and they made me go there, and I had to stay very long. And one thing that was not very nice was that they insisted that even though they were my own produced recordings and I had the cost, which was nil, they insisted on charging me taxes as if they were brought from Germany at a very high cost. I had to pay much more than the value of the LPs. That was a very difficult, not very friendly experience, not the fault of the Congress. A bureaucratic nightmare, and in that case, it was just shameful with the way they behaved in Vienna at that time. I love Vienna. I have nothing against the people. You know what I'm talking about. Those are many years ago, and some people are just rude and really ridiculously unfair. And that happens any place in the world. So it was just that individual that they made all.
Yeah, it can really happen, and it can really make the time a little bit more complicated. But I know that your exhibition, your place at the exhibition was always fulfilled with the people, and all wanted to hear you, all wanted to buy all your recordings when they came back, so that you were able to really have a lot of people who admire you. So
yes, fortunately, things went well.
Yes, but Alfredo, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are not originally from USA, right?
It's interesting. I was born in an island that looks like a crocodile. You look at the map of United States and look at Florida, and near it is Cuba. Actually, it was described to us as kids as el cocodrilo verde, which means literally the green crocodile. And of course, tropics, always green. The area where I live, very flat. The landscape, when I would go out driving with my family, riding on the car as a kid, it was sugarcane everywhere. That was the main produce of Cuba. And then the royal palm, which is the most beautiful of the palm trees that grew in the middle of, you would see these clusters of palms in many places, but very flat. Suddenly, when I was 11 in 1958, before the era of Castro, Venezuela was in a completely dramatic difference from what it is going through today. At that time, Venezuela was in an explosive economic boom. They had so much money because of the explosion of the oil production, and they didn't have enough people educated to make a fast advance of the country. So they had a policy of immigrants coming with medium skill, high skills, different kind of degrees. They could travel there, and immediately they were given visas very easily. And that's when my parents decided to move there. They have gone actually in 57. We stayed with my grandparents. And my sister and I flew there the following year in 1950, early 50 year. One fascinating thing that happened is we arrived by ship. I always tell the kids, have you heard about the cruises? And everybody says, oh yeah, cruise liners, fish ships. This was an old, ugly Spanish ship with horrible food. There was nothing pretty about it. And there was a big storm that people were terrified. And so it was not one of the fun cruises that people think of. For kids, for us, it was exciting. We loved it, of course. It was nothing fancy at all. So we arrived to the coast of Venezuela and went, first time in my life seeing mountains. First of all, I remember early morning seeing clouds far away, and it took us hours to realize that they were not clouds. They were gray at that time, far away, but as we got closer, they were actually the mountains. Then going up the mountain road, somebody turned on the radio. And we heard this music that was so beautiful, and we started talking about the music. I never heard that. I couldn't figure it out what the music was. A couple of days later, in the small black and white TV that my parents already got in the living room, there was a noon show called The Noon Show. And suddenly they were playing exactly the same music we heard on the radio, and it was harp music. The official national dance of Venezuela is harp music. A lot of people don't realize that the harp as a folk instrument played really generation after generation is Latin America more than any place in the world, uninterrupted tradition. Because we all know that in the Celtic harps, there was a kind of a vacuum, and then it was rebuilt. But we never lost that. That was from the European harps of many centuries back, the harps brought by the Spaniards to the countries. We have names of harpists in the 1500s arriving in the list of occupation of some of the people that were coming with expeditions from Europeans to what is today Latin America. So the harp was already established in Venezuela, and it was mostly in the plains, but it was like the official national dance is the joropo, which is music associated with the harp. So it's so popular, and especially at that time, that I would say it would be rare. I'm serious about this. It would be rare that that show, which was daily, would not have a harpist performing. There were not soloists. It was just groups where the harp was the center of the music, accompanied by the cuatro small four-string guitar, strumming, similar to the ukulele. So many people know what the ukulele is. Very similar to ukulele, a bit larger. And then the maracas. That was the typical group that would play this kind of music. And the singers were like national heroes. I mean, I got to see some of them in person. So I was 11. Then 4 years later, December of 61, I just turned 15. It was December. We were going to go for the Christmas vacation time. I was attending a Catholic school at the time. And just before going on vacation, there was a school celebration. And there was the choir and different people performing. And suddenly a friend from the playground, Fernando Guerrero, he played the harp. And as soon as it was done, I was in love with this music. I already had a few long play albums of harpists. And so I actually approached him and I asked him if he would teach me. So he said, sure, but I needed a harp to practice. He offered to teach me what he already knew. He was 13. Okay, so I went home and asked for a harp. And this is a very special situation because this is already 1961. It's the worst moment of the Cuban crisis. I arrived to a house which was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. My mother and my father. There was a sister that was born in Venezuela, still little baby. And we had about 10 Cuban refugees sleeping on the floor. Not mattresses, on the floor. That's all we had. And actually, when I was a typical self-centered teenager, 15, I want a harp. I want to learn the harp. And my mother reminded me that the week before, I actually had to break my piggy bank. I don't know if you use that expression, but where you put coins. Right?
Yeah. The little one. Yeah. For
right. So, right. So I had to break that and give her my coins to buy milk for my little sister. And of course, I thought, this is it. I remember I was crying and very down, feeling very sad about the circumstances. But amazingly, there was a man from Venezuela visiting some of the Cuban refugees they have met, and they overheard my conversation about this. The man says, I have a harp. It's not a good harp, but it's just a heavy for decoration. I'll be happy to let him borrow it. And that's how I began on a borrowed harp, secondhand lessons from this friend.
Oh, I have the goosebumps. Really, this amazing story.
It is. If you don't mind, I will extend more on that and tell you how I.
Yeah, of course.
It happens that Caracas, a large city, very spectacular city already, modern architecture, European style architecture. At the time, modern European, because of this influx of all these people coming from Europe, with the great economy of Venezuela. So we were living in a 12-story building, 9th floor, our apartment. My school was across the street. I just walked. It was a block away. That was my school. I had one small record player. Stereo music had not been invented yet, so it was just monaural, just one direction music. That's it. And I had a few LPs of harpists. I had discovered the music of Paraguay buying a record of famous harpists that I had seen on television. And of course, I had albums by Juan Vicente Torrealba, the most famous harpist at that time and great composer. He passed away just last year at 101 years of age. Actually, early this year.
Amazing.
Very recently. So one day, they announced on television that an amusement park called Coney Island, the famous one in New York, they just copied the name. It was an amusement park about 500 meters away from my home, where they were going to have a group from Paraguay performing. And this was a place where it was for free. They had like an amphitheater situation there with a high stage. And if you were going to the amusement park at certain time, they would stop all the rides and people would have a music concert. Well, I went there. I wanted to meet this man to play the harp. I haven't seen them on television. They were just announced. So I go there and I want to talk to the harpist. And of course, there is a guard in the door towards the dressing rooms. And there was no way he was going to let this kid come in. So I thought, well, he's a man. Sooner or later, he's going to go to the bathroom. I literally stood away watching him. And then sure enough, I saw him going to the bathroom. I'm going to sneak in. I went running, opened the door and got inside and went door by door trying to see if I could find this harpist. And I see a door open. And for the first time in my life, I see a Paraguayan harp leaning against the wall. The Venezuelan harp is a very, very beautiful instrument, but the wood finish is matte. It's not shiny. It's not fancy decorated. It's a very simple construction style. But in Paraguay, they were already finishing the instruments at that time, like if it was like a classical guitar, so very shiny, very beautiful. So I see this instrument, I was mesmerized by it. And suddenly the harpist arrived. And very quickly I tell him, like I'm playing already the harp, but I want to play the harp from Paraguay like they play. I have seen them in television. I have seen them performing. So the man says, well, why don't you call this man? And he wrote on a piece of paper a name, Marcial Valiente, and the phone number. So, and then I saw the show, and I was, imagine, it was in awe seeing this group. It was called Osvaldo Gaona, and the group was called Los Comuneros del Paraguay. It is, I won't translate that, but anyway, just a group relating to Paraguay in the name. And they had just, they were on the way to Europe. This was their last stop before going to Europe, where eventually he stayed living for many years before going back to South America. Even again, and he never went back for a long time. So I arrived home, needless to say, next day I was calling this phone number, and I don't know what I told this man, but then he said, what is your family doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I consulted with my parents. It was not nothing happened next day at night. And this man had offered to come to visit my family with a personal friend of his who was a harpist also, who was passing by. So unbelievable. Next night, we have a visit at home of these two gentlemen in this house full of refugees. And this man played the harp for us. In the conversation, I realized the man I have called was the consul of Paraguay, who was so taken by this kid obsessed with the music of his country, and he was a fanatic of their art and music, that he kindly offered that.
Amazing.
It was just incredible. Marcial Valiente, he passed away also since. So on the way out, Marcial Valiente says, after that, this wonderful serenade, private serenade inside the house, he's going out and he says, I know somebody that could teach you. And he says the name, and I think he gave us the phone number or something. When he says the name, this is the man I've seen on television before that I have an album of. And he was living in Caracas. Caracas is already 1 million or more at the time. Would you believe, when I figure out and make the phone calls, he lived just like literally 5-minute block walking distance from my home, where this harpist lived. So I go, needless to say, the first moment I figure it out, I'm going to that house, ring the bell, and the woman that opens the door is the singer that I have seen on television. I would describe it like the person that opens the door is Barbara Streisand or something like that. Something like, oh my God, these are these stars I have seen on television. And she was so kind and welcomed me. She's welcomed me to come in, and he wasn't there. His name was Alberto Romero. He wasn't there yet. And then I see his harp in the middle of the living room, resting on the floor there. I asked permission to try the harp. And it was the first time I had hands-on experience on a Paraguayan harp. And the harps in Latin America have quite a variety of construction styles nowadays. And the very old Paraguayan harps look like the Venezuelan harps even look still today. But there has been a transformation in the early part of the 20th century in Paraguay, and little bit at a time, they started getting very important changes. They had a curve that was more similar to the deep curve that you see in the pedal harp or many Celtic harps, but really a deeper curve, while in the Venezuelan harp is a very shallow curve, very little curve to it. And suddenly I was used to see it, and my strings, I could reach them in a straight line, rather high. That's the style the way I'm always playing in Venezuela, near the higher section of the string. But this harp had this curve that was getting in my way. So I was like, how do you do with this? It felt so strange. I was very disoriented. But I started plucking and trying to figure out my way. And I didn't realize he had arrived. He had arrived and was observing me from very quietly. So he finally introduced himself, and you can imagine I was like in heaven. He proceeded to teach me a bunch of stuff that day and do this and do that. And of course, we're talking about folk tradition. So there was no music theory involved. He was not talking about this key or that key. He's talking about do this, literally, imitation. You do this, okay? Now you try. No explanation of why the finger is here or why or nothing. Just pure imitation. And then he said, this is a good time for me. Next week, same time is good. And then it dawns on me, I literally didn't have a coin for candy. I had no money. My family is in crisis with all of these refugees. That kept happening. Some would find jobs and then more would come. And I finally got my words out, and it's difficult for me to talk about it. It gets me a little bit emotional when I remember it. He got really upset, look at me with straight faces. Who's talking about money? See you next week, same day, said him. He never accepted a penny from us.
Unbelievable. That's fantastic.
and he taught me for over a year. Alberto Romero was my teacher, and he introduced me to the Paraguayan harp. I still had a Venezuelan harp. My family would dance to it because being a Cuban, I was from very early trying to play some Cuban music on the harp, and I have friends from school that play the bongos and the claves, and I think my father also used to play the claves, and so we would play together in our little group and dance at home, and just for fun. It was a very fun thing, and eventually it was I needed a Paraguayan harp, one of my own. Mm-hmm. It was a huge effort from the family, and finally they managed to order a harp, which was ordered by my teacher, my Alberto Romero. They managed to get me my first Paraguayan harp. Like I said, it was a big effort from the family even though they were not expensive instruments, but still for the real economy that we had, it was a tremendous effort. Mm-hmm. And then I finished high school. I had played nothing professionally, except I have played in events with my professor. I was obsessed. I don't practice hardly the harp anymore. I'm very lazy, but in those times, oh my God. My family would go to the beach. They would come back. My fingers were bleeding. And I have forgotten to have lunch or dinner. I have been playing since early morning. I would actually rush from school just to play the harp. I would study quickly whatever I needed to from school and then play the harp. And it was just like that day after day. I was just obsessed with the instrument. Suddenly I found myself, I was like his most advanced student. So I was playing second harp when we played with a bunch of the students in harp ensembles. And the ensembles, by the way, they were not about playing in different written arrangements for first harp, second harp. No, just everybody playing the same thing. Maybe a second voice in a simple way, just, like you would play in the third below or whatever, a second voice. So I was the second harpist of the group. And I still was obsessive, practicing so much. And I was learning these pieces. I got blisters that would break, and sometimes I remember performing in a educational institution, not for pay, just it was a special educational event, and I was right here, and the person sitting in the first row, it was literally like I could touch her face, and my thumb started bleeding after I broke a very rough piece that he composed. That I still play. And I was doing so hard with my fingers, started bleeding, and the lady fainted right in front of us in the middle of the performance. That was the first spectacular event. Somebody fainted for my music because of my thumb.
That's amazing. And then you were a child.
So anyway, so I am loving it. I am playing for fun. Mm-hmm. Then it comes the opportunity to go to medical school. I have been dreaming of being a medical doctor. My grandfather was a medical doctor from Cuba. His son was a medical doctor, my uncle, and I dreamed of being a doctor. So sadly, the political circumstances at the time, there was so much unrest in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And not only that, sadly, there was animosity against the Cuban refugees in the universities because of the extreme left people. Mm-hmm. I think they think probably very different nowadays when they realize of what the reality of the communist regimes are, which is horrible in Venezuela, what they're going through. Mm-hmm. But at the time, literally, it was scary for my family. They have been, people were being beaten up and everything just because of being Cuban refugees by the communist groups at the university. Mm-hmm. It was very sad. And so they decided that they investigated a little bit, and there was a famous medical school in the city of Medellin, Colombia, and there was a Cuban family that they knew that was living already there. So things were arranged for me to go there. I remember flying in this international flight, first time in my life, and first time in an airplane to go to Medellin. And I presented the medical school admission test, and it was very stressful because it was in person. You have to go, and they have this long written test, and there were like a couple thousand people, and there were only like 200 spots available, and I managed to get in the in the medical school. That was December 1963. Here comes 1964. I begin medical school. I have my harp. I play for fun at the house. I am renting a room and paying for the room and meals at this family's home. And then they said to me that somebody that they knew was getting married and maybe they would like me to play at the wedding. And so they proposed me to play at this wedding. Was going to be my first job. So I didn't know how to charge. So I had to tell them that I would consider it and ask. So I remember having to go around and going to places where there were musicians, that there were special restaurants and bars where traditional music groups would gather, and people would come and hire them for the serenade. Serenade is a very beautiful tradition, still popular in our countries, where you would bring musicians to play live by somebody's window. It could be for Mother's Day, for a birthday, or a love serenade, declaring love through these romantic songs.
Beautiful.
So I went and asked these people how to charge. So they suggested to me what to charge. So they said that was acceptable. And I remember going to this first job ever, and it was in a private home full of tables and chairs. I could barely move with my harp, just moving around, trying to find a little spot. And I was moving around to play a few songs here and then a few songs there. And then there was a couple in one of the tables that said to me, where can we buy your records? No CDs yet. See, they refer to albums, your album. I said, this is my first job. I've never made a record. And the man looks at me and says, really? Why don't you call me next week? And gets a business card and gives it to me. And I put it in my pocket and I kept on playing. Party's over and I grabbed the paper and I looked there. This man worked for a recording company. So I called him and he invited me to go to the recording company the following week. Made an appointment and I go there. He actually was one of the top executives of that recording company.
Wow. I
played for a group of people, and right there on the spot, they said, yeah, we want to record your music. We can offer you this much. And at the time, I don't remember the exact amount, but it sounded like a bunch of money to me. I wasn't going to get royalties for the sales of the record, and it was just like a flat rate. And that's how I was hired, and I did the first album. Here, this was like in springtime of 1964. For the summertime, I had a long, long break, so I went back to my home in Venezuela. I come back, and the people where I used to live, they say, you better call that company. They have been calling here all the time asking for you. Did you know that music is in the radio all the time? I said, what? And sure enough, they're showing the radio. I was literally several times a day. You were putting the main radio station. Here comes my music. So I called the recording company, and they wanted an exclusive contract. They wanted to sign me up so I would not record for any other company. And they were offering now royalties, which I should have known better, but I had no idea. It was ridiculously small, the amount. But I was looking at it from the point of view that as soon as this started happening, I wrote a letter to my parents, and I said, thank you for being so kind. You have been helping me in the most difficult circumstances, trying to send me money. Please don't send me anymore. But I tell you, those first months, even though I have recorded and everything, the books were expensive. I was paying everything on my own. And I literally was not even eating well. I started losing weight until some of my classmates from medical school realized, and they were upset with me. So they would take turns to invite me for breakfast. So I was sometimes just a little bit of bread and coffee in the morning was thanks to my friends. Then little bit at a time, I started getting from that wedding. I had already somebody interested in this other thing and the other thing. And next thing you know, I was getting to support myself with a harp. And then following that album, then the first record I did was not even Paraguayan music. They liked that I play Cuban style music. So my first album was called Arpa Tropical, tropical harp. And it was more in that style of music from the Caribbean area. Then they wanted to record music in the style of the music of Colombia. So My second album was a dancing album of the coastal music of Colombia, cumbia, porro, and all of this, accompanied by a large ensemble of percussion players and all of that. And this is a time when still there's no stereo sound. Everybody together. You make a mistake, start all over. A bunch of microphones, but going into one channel. So they had the controller, the engineering was so different from what today a recording technology is. So we're talking about still 1960s. Actually, suddenly stereo came up, but that was a little bit later. So I recorded tropical music. Then it was music from the coast of Colombia. Then they wanted music from the mountain region, from the inside of Colombia. It was called Arpa Colombiana. The one from the coast, Arpa Costeña, which means literally harp from the coast. Mm-hmm. So it was like all of these things. And one thing I want to tell you is that in the near future, those who follow me in Facebook, not yet, but I would say maybe check in a week or two. I will have a little video I'm going to put there from the 60s, because I was the first harpist to ever play rock and roll.
Oh my goodness.
I recorded a rock and roll album where the accompanist was the most famous rock and roll group of Colombia at the time.
Oh, fantastic.
That is something that hardly anybody knows, because that album was probably the only one that was really a flop. They didn't sell well at all. So it was in the market for a very limited time, but I still have that album. So, and in a visit to Colombia, one of the persons there of the company, I went to say hello and everything, and they gave me a digital recording in a CD with it from the original master. So the sound is great on that. So I'm going to share that. You are going to laugh at that. It's one side of Alfredo Rolando Ortiz that nobody has ever seen in more than 50 years, literally.
Absolutely, Nick. Alfredo, because I know that you are also a composer. You do compositions. At that time, did you also compose everything by yourself, or how?
I was composing from very early, but the company had no interest in my music at all. The philosophy was to play what was already famous. So I was playing things that already somebody else has done. Even the rock and roll album was famous pieces. The mistake they did was that when I recorded the album, you know, rock and roll music would come and go quickly, and then the new hits of that artist came. And that's the reason it failed, because it was released like a good 6 months or so after the peak of that music. And, you know, the people that is into that, they would buy the new stuff right away. So that it left very little in the marketplace. That was the only one that was really like that. But anyway, so that was the process of my beginning with the music. And it actually took some years until I got really planted myself hard. And the company has been always telling me, because I said I want to record an album of music from Paraguay. Mm-hmm. And they said, yeah, we'll do it later. And 1 year I still had the contract signed, and I said, you know, you have been playing with me all these years. No, I'm not recording with you anymore. But you have signed a recorded contract signed. I don't care, do whatever you want, I'm not going to record. So they finally accepted to record an album from Paraguay, because I was refusing to record anything else. And I was for months ignoring the phone and everything. There was no, I mean, people would tell me, you have a message from that company, you know, landlines, no cell phones, no computer. It was just, you have been receiving calls, I'm not replying to them. And the friend, because he was a personal friend by then, he passed away also recently. The man that discovered me in that first party, Alvaro Arango was his name. Interestingly, he was a dentist by profession, and he got involved in the recording music and then abandoned completely the dentistry career. Alvaro Arango was already my friend here with the company, and he actually interceded. He was not in charge of what I was going to record necessarily, but he understood that if he wanted to do anything else, it would have to be Paraguayan music first, because it was not me making the decisions. This is another part of the story. Most artists today, they create their music and do their album. No, they would tell me, Alfredo, you have here a list of 15 songs, pick 12. we're going to do an album of music from Mexico, or we're going to do an album of this. When I really hated a song, I used to tell them, that doesn't work on the harp. I just cannot figure that one out. so I could select another one or give me another option. So, but on the other hand, thanks to them insisting on recording all of this kind of music, I began recording a variety of music that nobody has ever recorded. I think probably nobody else has recorded the variety of music I have recorded. I don't think so, because these circumstances, I recorded music from the Andes, music from Argentina, music from Mexico, music from Cuba, music from Colombia, rock and roll. All of these things were happening because of the wishes of the recording company. They found this popular harpist that was so, well, anyway. So
I may interrupt you. I just want to ask, because of course I also suppose that we are not watched by only harpists, but also by the people who don't understand the harp too much, and they don't know how the notation on the Paraguayan harp looks like. Is it the same like on the other instruments, or is it totally different?
A great question. The first time I went to Paraguay was quite a few years later, in 1972. Every place I went to ask for music for the harp, you know what the answer was? You don't write music for the harp. You're supposed to play it just by ear. And that's a reality throughout Latin America. We do not play my music notation. We play by ear. It's a real folk countryside instrument that is played by ear. Just learn by look and do. That's the reality. Not only that, some of the things that we do at the speed and everything, you don't want to worry about trying to read that, because it would be like a puzzle. So many things and so many notes, and it's like flamenco. Mm-hmm. Flamenco, you don't write flamenco either. Maybe nowadays they will figure out some place of putting a few symbols, but you don't write it in detail. Mm-hmm. Similar to what happens with jazz, you may have some things there to follow, but the rest is up to you. But in our case, it's not even that. It's by ear. That was the way I learned, and that's a reality. The first time Latin American harp music was written in a book format, to my knowledge, was my very first book, which was I wrote in 1978, mm-hmm. and that was during the pregnancy of my first daughter. It came to be printed in 79, and it's called Latin American Harps: History, Music and Techniques for Pedal and Non-Pedal Harpists. That was such a long name. I thought nobody was going to buy that, but actually right now what is available is the second printing of the third edition of that book. And it's music required by like the Trinity College harp syllabus requires some of those pieces there, and is played by many classical harpists are recorded. A Light in the Sea, the piece I composed for my wife, the first composition for my wife, is included in that book. So that book was a mixture of traditional melodies, but also my own compositions.
So you can also your compositions, which you are playing by ears, can be
exactly. My composition I created by ear. I eventually put them down. I learned music theory by myself, mm-hmm. and eventually when I decided to put them into the book, then that's when I did that. But it was not. I never composed by writing. I composed by creating them with my instrument. But
your music at home, and I know that it's really, they are beautiful music, and they are really so lovely for also the young players to play that. And I know that you composed also a concerto which you have performed at Prague Congress.
Yes, at my South American Suite for Harp and Orchestra.
Indeed.
That was a major project. It was my composition, but the orchestration, I hired the services of Paul Hurst to be the orchestrator, but we worked together, because if I was giving my music to be just orchestrated, it would lose completely the character easily, mm-hmm. because the rhythms are very unique and the way the phrases are supposed to is very unique. So mm-hmm. I had to make sure. So he was the one, the expert writing the notes, but I remember Mom and Han would say, that phrase is very beautiful. You move it, the whole thing to the left 1/8 note. Why? It sounds off. I said, precisely. It sounds, and remove the last. But that's the one that concludes it. No, it says, that's what keeps the character. So it was like, that's why my South American suite became such a popular event. I want to get into that in a moment, but I want to, going back to the situation with the Paraguayan music, the album that I wanted to do. Eventually, I did 28 albums, 27 actually for this company, but several more being part, like accompanying famous singers a couple of times, and other albums which were more like an ensemble projects. But my own, there were 27 LPs that I did with that company, and I got a gold record eventually. But the Paraguayan music, they finally recorded it, interrupted the recording because Christmas was coming, and every Christmas they wanted me to release an album of dancing music because it was assured that people were waiting the next Alfredo Rolando Ortiz dancing music album. It was like a tradition. Every year there was a new dancing album by Alfredo. And so we did that one, and it was released probably in late November or so. And the Paraguayan album we finished right after, and it was released, and the Paraguayan album was released and arrived mid-December, too late. Suddenly, here comes the reports of sales. My Paraguayan album is in the top 10.
Wow.
In the country. And then they realize I've been right all along. It's sold more than multiple times what the dancing music, which was also a big hit, but the Paraguayan was the one that was. And suddenly that was accepted. The company was excited because Japan released the album, Spain released the album, in Central America they released the album, in Ecuador, in Peru, in different countries, the same album was being released in other places. And at that time, they started believing in following my advice. Then I started getting stronger and insisting on, I want decent looking covers, because that's another chapter that I will one day share with people. It was terrible. I was the first person that managed to get, fighting with the company, to give credit to the companies. They would refuse to write the names of who played what instrument, only me, because they thought that they were going there to want more money or something, because they were being given credit. Can you believe that?
That's unbelievable.
I'm very proud that I was the first artist in Colombia that managed to get the companies. Not only that, I insisted on writing a note that appeared in the back thanking them.
Amazing. Alfredo, what interested certainly many people also about the instrument, because it's different, as we were talking already at the beginning of
it is very different in some details, and you can see that when you see my videos there in YouTube and so on. One of the most unique things is that the neck of the harp, the top part, in Paraguay, eventually in the first half of the 20th century, maybe around in the 50s or so, they began making a double neck to prevent the problem of, which still happened to pedal harps for many years, which was that the neck would start bending because the pressure of the strings pulling from one side, the pressure would be so much that the whole neck would start bending. So that happens to other Latin American harps also. So they came up with a double neck, and the strings would come from holes exactly through the middle. So the Paraguayan harp is perfectly symmetrical, to the point that one of the things that struck me the first time I was in Paraguay in '72 was that all left-handed harpists played reverse, because the instrument was identical. You had nothing like, not a mechanical device or something that would get in your way. So you could literally play it in either side. It's a diatonic instrument, no levers. Now they are putting levers in the harps, in some of the harps in recent decades, but the traditional harp had no levers. All Latin American harps, diatonic, one key, you can put to any key.
Tuned in C minor or C major? Or?
No, it depends on the country. In Paraguay, the most popular keys were G or F. For some reason, they generalized to F because of a color coding that is used now. Is reverse from the classical. They use red F, blue C, which would drive nuts classical harpists. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
But in Venezuela, no color patterns. Now they are starting to use. With the first harp I had, all strings here were black, and bass were different colors. Sometimes there was like a purple string for decoration, or a green string, but there was no particular purpose. So every time you went to somebody else's harp, you had no idea what those colors were just for decoration. The few that had colors.
Oh my
And, so I had literally to count strings. You know, like when I was learning, I was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. Put the other hand and figure out where to put my hands.
And Alfredo, in these days, which colors are you using? You are using F for the C and red for the F, or?
In Paraguay, it was generalized. I'm sure that what happens is it's very obvious that they try to imitate the color coding on the classical harp, and they got it wrong. That's the simple explanation to that. It's interesting that before that, there was also an attempt to put colors, and the harps that I ended up playing for decades now, the way they have it, and I see a phone here in the camera. Oops. I have a spy here. My wife here was filming us. Hello, she's saying hello. She was taking a photo of us. Anyway, so in my harps, this is even more confusing. My blue string is A and the red is E. So visually, when people that play all the harp, pedal harp, come to my harp, I say, think D, because I tune in F. So when I'm playing in F, visually for you, I'm in D.
Oh my goodness.
But to my students, I have used the red C and blue F for a long time. I'm lazy enough. I haven't changed myself, but I teach them. My grandson is learning now with the red C and the blue F on his Paraguayan harp. You can change the colors, and that's something that anybody. There are many pedal harpists that own Paraguayan harps. They're marvelous instruments, and you can request them with the colors that you're familiar with. So, if some of you is thinking of ever having a Paraguayan harp, it's a wonderful other type of harp to have fun, and no pedals, so you will be resting your feet.
But you cannot choose the tonality, right? Or you can just prepare the tonality.
You retune, and sometimes you can, like in some of the cases, you can tune specially one note, for example, to have like a sharp in a special location, play part of the melody that needs a sharp there, and then you change octave to play the other part. I've done that. Also, many times, something described historically by the harpist Ludovico of the coast of Spain of centuries back. They describe how he would press the strings either near the top or near the sound box with the finger or the fingernail, either way, pressing to shorten the string to give you the half step.
True. Right.
In Paraguay, some people are incredible virtuosos doing that, and they use like either special rings that have protrusions of metal, and you will see them high speed moving the hand in a way, pushing the string. And probably the greatest harpist with that technique, Nicolás Caballero, still alive and well, is an incredible technique. He would play a chromatic scale at speed. I'm not kidding you. It's something like, you could barely see what's happening. And it's just like this, just incredible. And at speed that is impossible with levers or with anything. It's just only that way. So there are ways of doing it. But the real traditional music is diatonic. Is a diatonic instrument, and the music would be attached to that. On the other hand, a lot of our music is not really instrumental. It's only Paraguay has a large repertoire of instrumental music. And Venezuela has also quite a lot. But number one is Paraguay. But in most of the other areas, you will find that the harp is the main instrument accompanying within a group, and there's usually singing. You have songs associated with the harp. For example, in the case of Mexico, a lot of people don't realize that La Bamba, that famous song La Bamba, is harp music, centuries-old harp music. It's published in one of my books. And I was telling the harpist, you should learn at least an easy version, because it's for your benefit when you can share with others that I'm going to play a harp melody, centuries old, that you may recognize. Everybody knows La Bamba. People is shocked to realize. And the introduction of the sones from Veracruz, there are many songs from Veracruz that have unique things. They start playing, you know what song that is. But then comes the singing. So it's not just instrumental. Like I said, Paraguay, a lot of instrumental music. Felix Perez Cardoso, a harpist who was in the first half of the active muscle in the first half of the 20th century, incredible composer, and he was the one that made famous Pájaro Campana. His version of Pájaro Campana was the one that became famous, and everybody plays different, but he was the one that established that pattern, and he composed a lot of very beautiful and very challenging repertoire for the Paraguayan harp, instrumental. He was the real big super composer for instrumental music in Paraguay. But there is also instrumental music much older than that. So the harp is a very integral part of our traditions in Latin America. In my case, I am aware that I was the first person really doing solo performances on the Paraguayan harp. I'm used to do full 2-hour concerts, not just of traditional music, my own compositions for over 50 years. I've been doing that. And in that respect, I'm very different. I never had a group. People think that when they see my recordings of Paraguayan music, that was my own ensemble. No, there were people hired by the recording company to accompany me for that particular music. But when I was playing live in private events and everything, always solo.
And I was always impressed already since Vienna when we heard each other, or I heard your performance for the first time. I was impressed that the harp is very small, but it's increased such a fantastic big sound. And also your technique on the Paraguayan harp is so different than on the classical harp. It has also the different position. You sit differently. You do different, like the tremolos, which are not used to on the harp. Just tell me a little bit about this. Tell us about this.
Yeah, there are unique techniques to the Latin American harp that are different from what is normally done with the pedal harp. One important thing to remember is that the tension level of our strings is much less. Pedal harp is extremely tight. Celtic harps are similar. Some of them are less tension, but most liver harps are made following more or less the tension level and construction and spacing of the pedal harp in most cases. In Latin America, the strings are much looser. The Venezuelan harp cannot be played in the center area because the strings would hit each other. They are so long. If you look at the photos of Venezuelan harp, the strings, this very long, slender instrument, very shallow curve, and you see them always playing up high. If you try to do that low, it just doesn't happen. And because they are so loose, you see some amazing effects that are used. By the way, in recent decades, they have changed dramatically. Paraguayan harp has a big influence with some of the special sounds that they were doing. It affected all the harp playing throughout Latin America. Everybody has been learning from the others and adding some of those techniques to their technical ability. And some of the muffling techniques of Paraguay were very unique. And then in Venezuela, with the soft strings, they literally sound like these weird noises. They will grab groups of the bass and go like, and you see them doing this, and it sounds like, it's not even a musical sound. It's more like this percussive effect. Those are possible because of the softness of the strings, impossible on a lever or pedal harp. But one technique, I teach these techniques, many of our techniques are possible on pedal harp. And I do these master classes nationally, internationally. And one you're talking about is the Paraguayan trino, or they call it trino, or tremolo that you're talking about, where we are actually, what is done is that we play back and forth with the fingertips or the fingernails on the same string at high speed. But you know what? Don't try it unless you are taught properly, because it's the only time you play with the extensors, because you play backwards. And every heartbeat has strong flexors. That's where we make the effort. We open the hand, and then the effort is this way. And people is tempted to do that. Not only that, they always show me the hand like this, and they say, it's what you do like. That is horrible for this, so it has to be done like this. And with literally a 2-minute practice, pretty much, forever and ever, until you get to the ability to do it. So I teach those things, and I may have videos available in the future. I used to have videos that became so old. Now I need to remake them because it's not appropriate to offer those. It's very from the early times of video, very poor quality.
It would be wonderful if you can ever give us some kind of lecture about this, because it's interesting. And I can see also that you are playing with the nails, which we as a classical harpist, we don't have nails, right?
Actually, let me tell you a story. Yes, classical harpists can play. You know Ocean Ellis?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Benjamin Britten composed for him the famous theme, right? Well, he played with his pedal harp in Los Angeles over 40 years ago. I was there, first row, and I see he has little bit of nails on the right hand. And I approached him after the concert. What are you using? And he said, yeah, I like it, especially for the highs and all that. And believe me, I went back and everybody has been raving about how beautiful the music and how everybody talking about this. And then I said, mention the nails. And one famous, I won't say the name, but one famous teacher was dumb enough to say, I knew there was something wrong that I couldn't pinpoint. What was wrong? Nothing. I'll tell you, when I tried the pedal harp for the first time, I went to Suzanne McDonald. We traded lessons. Suzanne McDonald got Paraguayan harp. And she gave me the Prokofiev Prelude in C and the Sonatina by Naderman #1. I showed up there. It took me forever because I'm not a sight reader of music. I showed up at Suzanne's house and I played the Sonatina, and she started laughing so hard and said, what's wrong? And she says, no, it's fine, but you're giving it a nice Latin beat to the piece. So, and I'll never forget, Suzanne is a person that I love dearly as a friend, and she changed my life because I was very intimidated by these pedal harps. And I thought maybe I'm doing everything wrong. And first time I played in front of her, and I said, what should I change? And her answer was, why should you? It works. Why should you change? Mm. And I'm always thankful that she literally opened my eyes. Guess what? Because of that, I bought a pedal harp. That was back in 1975.
Wow. That was my question to you also. If you have ever tried to play the pedal harp, if you have ever tried to play the classical harp.
I have a pedal harp. I don't play it per se, but I have it at home and I love it. I compose on it. I compose my Venezolana for 5 pedal harp sitting on that instrument. I just composed my Niagara Moon was composed, which premiered at the World Harp Congress in Tacoma, Seattle, where I couldn't be. I was supposed to have been there, and I remember I had a horrible fracture. I couldn't be at the Congress. I was in the hospital waiting for a very complicated surgery. Amazingly, I was in the surgical room being operated upon at the same time at the Congress where they were playing my Venezolana for 5 pedal harps in a concert. And my friend from the Netherlands, Bonnie Rietveld, was the one that announced to the audience my circumstances. But my music was brought alive. I was supposed to have been there to see that. And I was supposed to have been there to see Charlene Wallace, wonderful pedal harpist from Canada, perform the world premiere of Niagara Moon. She plays it constantly in the concerts and is planning on recording it now. And it's played by a lot of pedal harpists. So I composed for the pedal harp. I have a pedal harp, but don't ask me to play properly on the pedal harp. You know, it's not my specialty.
Amazing. Not only as a person, as we have already today, we have been able to be aware of, because I know you very long time, since really Vienna, 33 years old, a long time we have been in contact, and we have met at every Congress where we were able to meet. We have been always there. You are really part of the Congress, is part of all the harp events. Always, you can't be missed. I'm so happy that you took your time today for us.
Oh, my pleasure. I want to tell you something I'll never forget. Remember Tacoma? You played. I was in the audience. And the first piece you started playing, I'll never forget the gasp of the audience. Marveled. I think it was harpist. And everybody went like, when you started playing, because you are such a magnificent, incredible harpist. Besides being a friend, I admire so much. You are incredible, incredible artistry. And I also remember when, after your performance, everybody forgot that restaurants close early in Latin America. You had no place to eat, and my wife and I had to rescue you and take you out to dinner someplace. Find finally a coffee shop that was the only thing open in the area. And our friendship got cemented in that incredible opportunity. And we love you a lot. Thank you for all you do for the harp world and these things that you're doing here. I invite your audience to please visit my website. It was too long my name, so ALFREDOHarp.com is enough. That points to you to my website. On my full name, you can find me in Facebook. I cannot accept too many friends because I am about to get in the top of 5,000, but you can see my Facebook, and most of the videos are public. And you can see my rock and roll video coming soon.
I deeply, really, and strongly recommend everybody to search for Alfredo, because you will find so many fantastic recordings. And of course, follow his pages, follow his Facebook, anywhere where he has.
My book, please look at my books in Facebook. And one thing that I want to mention is my wife, she has a side of the Harp, very unique Harp jewelry. And you are a big collector of that. So on harpjewelry.com, takes you there. So harpjewelry.com, visit that place and you can see all the wonderful designs of my wife, Luz Marina. Anyway, thank you so much again for this opportunity. And I'll never forget that Congress in Vienna, that beautiful city, so many things that happened there, and all my adventure through the years at the World Harp Congress. And one of the most important moments was that marvelous opportunity, thanks to your invitation, to play my South American suite for harp and orchestra in the Czech Republic at the Spanish Hall of that incredible hall in the palace, in the castle.
It was our honor to have you here, and I'm so really thankful that you accepted today to have your time to wake up, because you woke up so early in the morning. We have a wonderful guest today, Alfredo Rolando Ortiz from California, Corona. Not
think of it rather.
Our day in Europe is already going to be at the end, but your day is starting, and we are so thankful that you had your time and that you shared all your experiences and your stories and your fantastic life. And I can only say that for the young children and for the young generation, all the dreams can come true if you go for them. And you are exactly the example of it.
Exactly. And everybody, please stay safe and follow all the advice of the health authorities, not the advice of politicians. Follow the health authorities' recommendations.
Absolutely. Alfredo, you also, Luz Marina as well. Many greetings, kisses to both of you. Please take care of yourself, stay safe. And I'm sure, as I don't want to finish these interviews after the first Worldwide Online Harp Congress finishes, and I want to continue the interviews even afterwards, I'm sure I will invite you again, and we can really
It will be a pleasure. It will be a pleasure.
I thank you very, very much. I wish you a wonderful day. And I want now to also invite tomorrow. We have special 2 interviews tomorrow. One is already at 2 o'clock, the Central European time at 2 o'clock with Sionette Williams. Don't miss it, because she will be also performing the piece which she is going to talk about. It will be incredibly interesting interview again. And then at 5 o'clock, as usual, our time, European time, we will have Sonia Inglefield, who will also talk about her beautiful and wonderful mother, Ruth Inglefield, who passed away, unfortunately, last year. Yes. So I wish that we will meet tomorrow again 2 times. And once more, thank you very much, Alfredo, for today's your time and for a wonderful, wonderful talk and wonderful interview. And I kiss you.
My pleasure.
You and Luz Marina.
All the hype there.
Yes, I send many greetings to everybody. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, wonderful whatever is now in your city and your town. And take care. That's the main thing.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.